Do you want to perform incremental ETL in Azure Data Factory without creating any timestamp column or ID column? If yes, then now can use SQL native change data capture features to enable incremental ETL in Azure Data Factory mapping data flow. Hello everyone, myself Sarnendu. In this video, we'll be discussing about change data capture features of the Azure Data Factory, CDC Architecture, checkpoint details in the Azure Data Factory, and the best practices for the incremental ETL. And last, we'll have a demo of the incremental ETL using this SQL native CDC features in the Azure Data Factory. Now let us discuss about some CDC features in the mapping data flow. Azure Data Factory and the Synapse pipeline both supports these native CDC features when the sources are native CDC supported like SQL Server, Azure SQL Database and the Azure SQL Managed Instance. Right hand side image contains the image of the source transformation of the mapping data flow of the Azure Data Factory. This is the source option. Under the source option, we can see enable change data capture features. This option is showing in the source transformation because we have selected Azure SQL Database as the source, which is the CDC supported. Once we selected this option, we have two more options to select. First one is the enable incremental extract and second one is the enable native change data capture, which is currently in the preview. Once we check this enable native change data capture features, it allows Azure Data Factory to automatically detect and extract the change data, that is delta data, captured by the SQL native change data capture technology since the pipeline was last executed. Here delta data is the inserted, updated and the deleted data since the pipeline was last executed. As we are using the native CDC features, so to implement the CDC, we do not need any customization like to create timestamps or the ID column to implement the CDC. Here we can see the another option, start reading from the beginning. Once we check these options, it allows Azure Data Factory to load all the data from the source table in the initial pipeline run and load only the delta changes in the subsequent pipeline run. Now let us see some scenarios supported by the SQL native CDC features. First, it supports the auto replication of data. It automatically replicates the source data into the destination database. It supports the incremental ETL. While copying the data from the source table, we can transform the data and save the data in the destination. Now let us have a look at the CDC architecture. Actually, what happens behind the scenes. Right hand side image contains the transactional database as the source. Once we enable the CDC features in the source table, all process starts. While we enable the CDC features on the source table, few things are created. First is the changes table, next is the table valued query function. This change table is the mirror copy of the source table. Modified data is inserted into this changes table. Now let us start from the source table. Once we enable the CDC features on the source table, SQL Server agent captures the change data and insert into the log. For the Azure SQL database, CDC scheduler captures the changes and insert those into the log. Next, capture process get those data from the log and insert it into the changes table. Changes table itself the mirror copy of the source. Now the data consumer, for example, the ETL. So ETL gets data from the changes table using this table valued query function. And once the ETL job get those data from the changes table, it process, it transform the data and save or load the data into the data warehouse. So it's enable the incremental ETL. Every pipeline run, it only captures the change data and process those only instead of processing the whole source data at a time. So SQL Server agent or the CDC scheduler capture the change data from the source table to the log, capture process, get those data from the log and insert it into the change table. ETL fetches those data from the change table using the query function and transform those data and save into the or load into the data warehouse. Now let us know how we can enable the CDC on the database and the table. First we have to enable the CDC on the database level. This is the stored procedure, this is the system stored procedure we have to execute against the database. Next we have to enable CDC on the source table. This is the script to enable CDC on the table, system stored procedure. Here we have to pass schema, table name and the role. Once we enable CDC on the source table, it creates the capture instance. Capture instance is nothing but the change table and the two table valued query function. During the demo, we will be executing this system stored procedure to enable CDC on the database and the table. These are the table valued query function to query the change data. First one is to get the all changes data. Next one is to get the only one changes for each distinct row. Now let us have a look at the checkpoint details in the Azure Data Factory. Once we enable that native CDC features in the data flow, this checkpoint key will be available in the data flow activity. In the image, we can see we have selected the data flow, which has the source as the Azure SQL database. That's why we can see this checkpoint key here. This checkpoint key is the GUID and it is used to set the checkpoint details for the CDC. Now let us have a look at the best practices for the incremental ETL. When the connector are native CDC supported like Azure SQL Database, SQL Server and the managed instance, then it is recommended to use that native CDC features for the incremental ETL so that it only processes the delta data or the change data since the pipeline was last executed. It only takes few clicks to work the CDC features which enables incremental ETL. And the important thing is that we do not need to customize anything like to create timestamp or the ID column to implement the CDC, which actually faster our development with lesser issue. And the most important thing is there will be minimal or no impact at the source system because we will be fetching the delta data, change data only. We will not be fetching whole data every time the pipeline runs. So it will have no impact on the transactional application. Now let us go to the demo section. For demo, I have already logged into the Azure portal and created the data pipeline and the data flow in the Azure Data Factory. This is the data flow activity. Now let us open this data flow. So first let us look at the data source. So in the data source we can see data source is the Azure SQL database. We are fetching the data from the Azure SQL database. So table is the dba.product. Product is the table. Now let us go to the SQL Server Management Studio. This is the source table dba.product. Here we can see only 3 rows are there. Now let us go to the data flow itself. This is the source. Now let us go to the source option. In the source option we can see we have checked the enable change data capture features. This is the features we have to enable. After that we have to click on the enable native change data capture feature which is currently in preview. After that we have to also check this start reading from the beginning checkbox. Once we enable the native change data capture features, it allows Azure Data Factory to automatically detect and extract the changed or delta data from the source since the pipeline was last executed. So we have enabled the change data capture features at the data flow level. Now let us see in the pipeline level. As we have checked that change data capture features, so that this checkpoint key is available here. This is the checkpoint key Data Factory used to implement the CDC features. Now let us uncheck this feature. I am just unchecking this. Now let us see what happened in the pipeline level. So let me deselect this one and select once again. Now see that checkpoint key is not available here because we have unchecked this change data capture features. We disable it. That's why this checkpoint key is not available here. Now let me check again. Now let us see. Now let me deselect it and again select it. See that checkpoint key is again available here. Now let us go to the sync. What is the sync? Sync is also the Azure SQL database. For the demo, we have used two different tables in the same server, same SQL server. In the settings section, you can see we have checked all the update method, insert, delete, upsert and the update. And here is the key columns. This is the important. This is the product ID, which is the part of product table. So this column is used to check whether a particular row will be inserted, deleted or updated. Now let us see the destination table. This is the destination table. Now this is blank. Now let us see the schema of the tables here. This product table contains 3 fields: product ID, product name and the product price. And the product destination table also contains product ID, product name, product price and another extra column, that is operation type. Now let us see that in the data flow itself why this is new column. Here in the data flow you can see this is our source, this is our destination. Here we have created one small transformation using the derived column. Here we have created that operation type column. So what we saw here in the destination table, operation type. So this operation type column will hold the value of whether a row is inserted or updated during the change data capture. This is the small ETL functionality. Here the source data will be extracted and the change data will be captured. Next we will be performing some transformation. Here we are creating one derived column. Next we are loading those data in the destination table. Before the initial load, let us preview the data. Here I am getting one error. Source table dvo.product is not enabled for the CDC. That is, source table is not CDC enabled. Now we have to enable CDC on the source table. First we have to enable CDC at the database level. For that we have to execute this system store procedure. Now let us execute this one. Next let us enable the CDC on the source table using this system store procedure. Here we have to pass this parameter. First one is the schema, next is the table name, that is the product table, next the role. Now let us execute this one to enable CDC on the table, source table. This is completed successfully. Now let us preview the data. Now it should display. Now the source data is displayed here. This is the product ID 1, 2 and 3. So we have enabled CDC at the source, as well as we have enabled the native change data capture features at the data flow level. Now our pipeline is ready for the initial load. Now let us debug it. I am starting the debug session. So in the initial run, it will copy 3 rows. See, there is no data in the destination. There is 3 rows in the source table. So data flow will write only 3 rows in the destination table. Here we will check two things. How many rows data flow writes in the table, and we will also check the destination table. How many rows were inserted in the initial load. Now the initial load has been completed successfully. Now let us see the data flow details. How many rows it has written. See, number of rows written is the 3 because we have the 3 rows in the source table. Now let us check the destination table. You see, only 3 rows has been inserted because data flow has written 3 rows in the destination table and the operation type is inserted. This is the initial load, so that's why it is inserted. To perform the change data capture, we need to modify the source table so that we can perform the CDC. So to do that, we will be updating one record and deleting one record in the source table. This is one. First, we will be updating one record which product ID is 2. I am just updating this one. Next, I will be deleting one existing record from the source for the product ID 3. Now let us run the pipeline. Here I am starting the debug session. So here what will happen? In this subsequent, this is the subsequent pipeline execution. In this execution, data flow will write only 2 records in the destination table. First record is for the product, that will be updated for the product ID 2, and the next record that will be deleted for the product ID 3. So this record will be deleted from the destination also, and this will be updated in the destination table, and the operation type should be updated. Now the subsequent pipeline execution is also completed successfully. Now let us see the data flow. How many rows it has written to the destination table. Number of rows written is 2 because we have modified 2 rows at the source. One is I have updated, another is I have deleted. Now let us see the destination table. See, the record for the product ID 3 is deleted. That was deleted, so there is no record for the product ID 3, and the product ID is updated. This operation type is updated, and the product price becomes 66.66. These were the updated value. So in the subsequent pipeline run, it only captured the change data or the delta data that was created since the pipeline was last executed. After the initial load, I have updated the 2 records at the source table. One is updated, another is the deleted. So update has been happened for the 2 record at the source after the initial load. So in the subsequent pipeline execution, it only copied or extracted only the 2 records. So this is the change data capture feature of the SQL. Now let us try to change the another record at the source. I am just inserting one new record at the source for the product ID 4. Now let us see how many rows is there at the source. See, product ID 4 is inserted. Now let me run the pipeline. I am debugging it. Now the data flow should write only one record. This will not copy the record of product ID 1 and 2. It will only copy the record of product ID 4 because we have inserted one record of product ID 4 after the last pipeline execution. That the capture of the change data after the last pipeline execution. Now this is success. Now let us see how many records it writes in the destination table. Number of rows is 1. 1 rows is written. Now let us see the destination table. See, only one record is inserted. The operation type is also inserted. Product ID 4 inserted. Here we have inserted one record of product ID 4 at the source, and now this is the destination. 2 other records remain intact. So from this demo, we understood how native change data capture features of the SQL source enables the incremental ETL. Here in the initial pipeline execution, it copies all the data from the source, but in the subsequent pipeline run, it only extracted the change data. Those were updated or inserted after the initial load. And after that, it also performed the transformation, that is added the derived column value for each whether it is inserted or updated and load the data in the destination. Hope this video helps you. Thanks for watching.